So I want to welcome everybody to today's video. In this video, we're going to talk about Princess Cruise Line and accessibility, how to take the most advantage of your upcoming cruise, how to get the cabins you need, and how to find answers to your questions. So we're really fortunate to have with us today LaDonna Allen, and she is the National Account Manager for Princess Cruise Lines. And she and I are going to talk about accessibility and the tools that are available and how to make the most of them. If you're watching for the first time, or if you haven't already subscribed, do me a favor, please hit subscribe and hit like. That way YouTube will know to share it with others and you'll get notified when I put out the next video. And so LaDonna, you want to give us a little bit about your background in the industry and with Princess?
Sure. I was a travel agent for 18 years and always worked in an office, in a traditional office setting as a travel agent. And so I do have some experience with all of the various cruise lines. And then 6 years ago, I came to work for Princess, which was always one of my favorite cruise lines to work with as a travel advisor and also to sail on as well. Came to work at Princess, and then a couple of years after I went to work at Princess as a business development manager, I moved over to the national account department. And so I now work in national accounts, so I work with all of the headquarter accounts.
Oh, well, very nice. So you have some experience from both sides of the desk, and you're a fan of your own product. That's always good to see.
Absolutely.
Okay, so one comment I hear, and this was specifically brought up in a Facebook group that I run for people that travel with challenges, is that on Princess, it seemed like there wasn't much availability for passengers that needed an accessible cabin. So can you offer them any advice, any suggestions?
Book as far out as possible. We do limit accessible cabins to people who do have a need. So we do have that requirement so that we have people not just reserving them because they want some extra space, right? We have a process in place whereby you submit some information so that you verify that you do have this need, because of course, we do limit the number of the cabins that are accessible. It does vary by ship, and with Princess, we have quite a few different classes of ships. So we have everything from our mid-sized ships, which would be the Island and the Coral Princess, which were built to go through the Panama Canal. Those are our Panamax ships. And then we have a little bit larger class of ship, which would be like the Emerald and the Crown Princess. All of the ships within that class, every class that we have does have accessible staterooms. Where you find the big difference is you find in these different classes, how many staterooms there are and kind of the width of some of the stateroom doors. That sort of evolved over time. So those are things that would make differences, but there are no ships that do not have accessible staterooms. There are also not any ships that don't have washers and dryers, oddly enough. That's one thing that all of our ships have as well. So there are some things that are standard within all of the ships. You will find that each ship is a little bit different in terms of some of the restaurants that are on board and things like that. But in terms of accessible staterooms, they're always available. And the best idea is to book them as far out as possible. And then once you get that cabin booked, you want to make sure that you stay on top of getting all of your ocean ready information done. All of our ships are now Medallion class. Medallion class is a class of vessel, not a class of stateroom. So every stateroom that is on board does have Medallion, and I'm wearing my Medallion here. So this is an actual Medallion itself. It pops right out. This is just a little holder here. But this is your Medallion, and your Medallion allows you to be able to interact with the ship. And so that is super helpful whenever we're looking at accessibility, because it allows you some additional resources that might not always be available. And it also gives you access to have the power of personalization kind of in the palm of your hand. and it allows you to be able to kind of define what your interaction with the ship is. And because you have this on your device, we've got accessible paths. We have a piece of Medallion that's called Ocean Compass, where you can navigate around the ship like Waze. And that does have the accessible route maps. So you have accessibility on every single ship. You have that interaction with Medallion class on every single ship. It's just really a matter of booking as far out as possible and then making sure that you do follow up on getting the documentation in that is required, so that we wouldn't, if we didn't receive the documentation, you would be removed from an accessible stateroom, because we're really committed to holding those open for people who need them.
Okay, very nice. And you mentioned there was a difference in the number of cabins of accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Other than ship size, is there something, you know, are there some, so within a category, all the ships would have probably the same number of accessible cabins? Because I would assume they're pretty much
within that class, right? Yeah. So within that class of ship, we do have a few more accessible cabins on the Royal class, which would be the Royal, the Regal, that largest class of ship that we have. That particular ship also only, or class of ships, also only has inside and balcony staterooms. There are no outside staterooms on those ships. So you don't have the outside option, but you do have multiple categories in balconies and more of the mini suites and suites. And by that, you do have a higher number of accessible cabins on those larger ships.
Okay, so now let me ask a question. As I mentioned before we started, I interviewed one of your sister lines yesterday, and within their line, they have like different categories of accessibility. Do you have the same thing, or do you just have either non-accessible or fully accessible cabins?
We don't have different categories. What we do have is we have different options that are available in terms of, you know, the different categories of the ship, of the actual ship itself, but we don't have like partially accessible and fully accessible. We either have accessible or they're not. It just depends on the category, you know, whether you're booking those insides, outsides, or suites. And we do have accessible suites as well. So that's an important differentiation, that we do have accessible suites. We also have accessible mini suites as well. So you have something available in all of the different cabin categories.
Yeah, and that's very nice because I see sometimes where you can get an accessible balcony on some ships, but you can't get a mini suite, and again, part of it depends on what the passenger needs, because if you just have a scooter, all you need is the door wide enough to get the scooter in a suite, and you're fine. But if you need a roll-in shower and you need, you know, lower facilities, that, you know, if you truly need a fully accessible, you know, having it available in suites is a nice step up for those that want to travel that way. So that's
absolutely.
Okay, and so so that kind of ties into my next question. Do you require proof of need? So what do you require? What do they have to submit?
We do have an accessibility form that you have to fill out, and your travel advisor fills that out and submits that for you. I would always recommend that you book with a travel advisor specifically for things like this, because you want to make sure that you have all of the documentation covered. So this is something that again, you know, I always think that a travel advisor is a helpful asset to you in any scenario, but especially from an accessibility perspective, because they will be sending in your required documentation to our access office. You definitely want to have somebody in your corner there that can be your advocate and get that documentation taken care of for you. So those arrangements must be secured in advance. And the earlier you do that, the better. Like I say, if we get to a point where we need accessible staterooms and we have not received your documentation, we will remove you from the accessible stateroom.
Okay. Yeah. So that's just one of those things to take care of right away. And, you know, I am a travel advisor, but just in general, I encourage people to book with travel advisors all the time. For those that went through the issues of getting refunds and moving bookings and stuff. Those that had travel agents had a much easier life than those that didn't. I firmly, and I'm not trying to sell myself, I'm just saying that in general, it's the way to go. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, really.
And we do, I don't know if this is something that you typically cover. We do allow service animals. We do not allow the emotional support animals. They do have to be true service animals. We don't provide food for the service animals. We do have dog litter that's available on each one of the ships. But again, these are things that need to be done in advance, and guests are always advised to consult local authorities in each port of call for something like a service animal, so that they make sure they have the necessary documentation for each one of the ports of call.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I didn't have it on my list of questions. And that is really important, because there are some places where you basically, it's going to be impossible to get a service animal off the ship. And I don't know. So if they're not able to debark at a port, does that preclude them from taking the cruise, or they just can't go ashore?
They can't go ashore in that particular port, so it wouldn't preclude them from being able to take the cruise altogether. Something else that you might want to keep in mind with us and with our sister company, Holland America, is that we own lodges in Alaska. So if Alaska is where you're looking to go, know also that each one of the lodges does have specific information with accessibility. But they do have accessible rooms that are available. They actually do have more accessible rooms than what would typically match up with a cruise tour. So that way we make sure that we have all of that covered in terms of the accessible rooms that are available. But that's another important point, is that we would have accessible transportation to get them to the lodges, and there are accessible rooms there at the lodges as well.
Oh, very nice. And I know you guys use Alaskan Railway. My wife and I took that from Anchorage to Seward a couple of years ago for a cruise, and I was very impressed with the accessibility on board on the train. You know, they were able to, even in Seward, they had a manual elevator, but they were able to get my wife in her wheelchair off the train. They had an elevator in the train, so it's kind of amazing.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Okay, so I'm going to find another question here. So that leads us really into the question I wanted to ask anyway. What about excursions? So we know you have Alaska excursions that they're accessible. And I found in general, Alaska is probably one of the more accessible places that you'll visit. I been very pleasantly surprised in all of my cruises to Alaska, which Alaska is my favorite destination far and away.
Lovely.
So let's go away from Alaska. In most ports, do you have accessible excursions?
There are. I mean, you know, the problem is that it just depends on what country you're going to, and depends on what their local requirements are. So if we're looking at Tallinn, Estonia, there may not be something in some of these that have the old cobblestone streets. And that's something that we would let you know in advance. When you look at your shore excursion list, it will say whether or not those shore excursions are accessible before you even book them. So you'll be able to pick from them. There are some in most ports, but there could be some ports where it wouldn't be. And, you know, one of the other issues too is if you're using a tender. So that's something else to keep in mind. You know, those tender ports, the tenders aren't accessible. And so if it is a tender port, that's something that you want to keep in mind, is that excursions wouldn't be available there because we don't have a way to access the tender.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, and we talked about this yesterday with one of your sister lines, is that in Grand Cayman's an example where, for at least some ships, they do have tenders that are accessible, because they get off and you're on the top deck of the tender, which is kind of unusual. But that was the one place that my wife and I have been that had, and not every cruise line there, because we spent the day watching people come and go, and not every excursion, not every ship had an accessible tender. There were just a few of them that had the top ramp where you could get off the ship onto it. Okay, and so let me ask on the excursions. So do you show them as wheelchair accessible or limited mobility? How are they categorized, the excursions?
They're categorized exactly as you're describing, whether they're accessible or for limited mobility. It also kind of tells you the pace of the shore excursion as well. So if it's a more strenuous shore excursion, or if it's one that someone who has moderate capability would be able to do. So it's really pretty well broken down for you in terms of just accessibility of people who might need an assisted device, but also some people who just need to know how strenuous it's going to be. So that is something that's very well clarified with all of the shore excursions.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that information. And, you know, it's interesting, you mentioned Tallinn, Estonia. My wife and I had a 10-day Baltics capital cruise booked a couple of years ago, and I wound up canceling the cruise. And I mean, I had flights and, you know, and everything already booked, but St. Petersburg is not particularly accessible, and a lot of the attractions are not accessible at all. You had Tallinn and some of the other ports that we were going to stop at that, you know, there just wasn't much available. And my wife travels with a wheelchair, and, you know, cobblestones and wheelchairs, especially though in a nice hill that you have to climb to get up to the castle or whatever's up there, is just not a very pleasant place to be. So
exactly. And so that's one of the things that you want to keep in mind, right? So we've got to look at it in multiple different ways. So some port facilities are accessible for mobility devices. Some ports of call may be accessed by a variety of different methods. You know, there may be a ramped gangway, there may be a series of steps, or there may be a water shuttle. And in some cases, you might have access to the water shuttle, but then the shoreside facility isn't accessible. So it's a lot of different pieces to keep together. And that's why we're very clear to indicate on those shore excursions and in each one of the ports, whether it's accessible at that time.
Yeah. And again, that's just one more reason to use a travel advisor, because they know exactly how to find the answers to the questions that a passenger might have. And so we want to, again, I will make that plug to contact your local travel agent, make arrangements that way. Okay, so what accommodations do you make for the blind?
Well, we do have several different ways that we make accommodations for whether you have limited hearing or limited sight as well. So we have what are called all-in-one kits, which include the TTY that can be placed in the guest cabins and arranged at the Princess Alaska lodges as well. All of the televisions on board do provide closed captioning, and most of the onboard theaters are equipped with assisted listening devices as well. So they are limited, and that is something that, again, you would want to let both your travel advisor know, but you also, when you get on board, you would want to connect with the guest services desk as well and make sure that they understand what your needs are and that they provide for those.
Okay, so it came up in the conversation yesterday. So in the dining room, do you have the Braille menus if they need them? Or do they read the menu?
They will read the menu. You do have a crew member that's there. And I'll be honest with you, going forward, post-COVID, we're not exactly sure what the menu situation is going to look like. So that's something that's still kind of up for discussion. We may have to do a follow-on visit once we know what that return to service really looks like. But I do think that menus in general are something that may be up for discussion, and how we handle that going forward, because, you know, in a post-COVID world, we will want to be careful of what we have in terms of high-touch surfaces.
And you know, I appreciate that, the constant reuse of them. You know, again, it's just a, and it's not just COVID, because you think about norovirus and some of the other things.
Exactly.
That, you know, to reduce the amount of contact between passengers like that is a good plan.
And that's
Okay.
another place that that Medallion comes into play here as well, because it gives us the functionality to be able to interact with the the passenger in a way that they're comfortable with, right? And it also is going to give us the ability to be able to provide things in a digital format so that the passenger can see what they want when they want it, as opposed to, you know, having a whole ton of paper that's floating around the ship. That's something that from a sustainability perspective we wanted to get away from anyway. And it's interesting that we developed Medallion back in 2017 is when we started this process of rolling it out on board the ship. So it was early in terms of moving into this space of technology, but it just really gives us the ability to offer a highly personalized, differentiated product that also doesn't have a lot of paper involved in it.
Yeah, and I have studied the medallion class, and it's pretty amazing what the technology will do for you. Okay, so for deaf individuals, do you provide an interpreter if they give you enough notice, or is that something?
We can. If we have enough notice, then we can do that. It's something that we have to take on a case-by-case basis. And we do have some people that travel with us in groups. And so I know that we've been able to arrange that in advance, but it does have to be done well in advance. And we do make sure that that there is the differentiation of, you know, if we provide an interpreter, what that interpreter is able to provide in terms of shore excursions and all of that. You know, there's a lot of different pieces to that whenever you need an interpreter as well.
Okay, and so again, it goes back to, and I would say for anybody that travels with challenges, one of the key things is get a hold of your travel advisor early, let them know what you need, you know, so that they can, you know, they can book the right packages for you, so they can choose the right ship, find the right cabins, all of the things you want. And the sooner out you start, the easier it is to find availability for that. So I would encourage that. Okay, what about for people that travel either with autism themselves or one of the sensory disorders, or perhaps they have children that have a challenge? I know muster drill is one of those things that can be a challenge, and so how do you deal with those kinds of things?
Well, for us, the muster drill is going to evolve post-COVID anyway. So that's one of the pieces that is in evolution right now in terms of exactly how we're going to handle it. We do have the ability, you know, to know from a geolocation perspective with the Medallion. So we know where you are on board the ship. We know if you visited your muster drill. It's not something that that we have to monitor by having everybody come together and watch a video. We've got the ability to be able to push that out to you on demand on your phone, or you can watch the video in your stateroom, and then we'll be able to track and know that you've visited your muster station whenever you check in at your muster station. So that's one thing that's definitely going to evolve post-COVID that will help with some of that. We do have people trained in our children's programs. We are partnered with the Discovery Network. And the Discovery Network it's actually a huge conglomeration. It's not like it's just one channel, the Discovery Channel, it's 57 different channels, but we are partnered with them in all of our children's programming. So we do have people who have special training, and we also have special programming that we can provide.
Okay, well, very nice. And then, so let me ask a question, and I apologize, this was an unscripted question. With the Medallion, can crew members, will they know that the person might have a challenge? Is that something that the crew can tell? Because I know on another one they had like lanyards they wore. So that information is available to the crew based on the Medallion they're wearing?
It is, and it's also something that from a safety perspective, you'll be able to send a message if there is something in an emergency situation. You would be able to send a message with your Medallion app as well, so that if you needed help, that would be provided for you. And again, you've got the Medallion on you so they can locate you.
Okay, well, very nice. That's you know, I am looking forward to getting a chance to experience Medallion class and to see all of the ways that opens up things for you. I think that the evolution of technology and its application to the cruise industry is going to just be amazing over the next few years. Okay, so let me go back. What about pools and hot tubs? Are they accessible?
We do have, yeah, we do have, I was trying to look and see all of our ships. I was reconfirming that it is all of the ships, but all of the ships are equipped with a pool lift on board. And our travel advisors, either you or other travel advisors who are listening, there are actually maps that you can find, and we have all of the specific locations of the pool lifts on each one of the ships.
Okay, very nice. And do they also apply to the hot tubs, or is that not something there's a lift for? Because I know a lot of times. I don't
believe that there's a lift for it. Again, that's something I need to probably reconfirm and circle back with you on, but I don't believe that there are in the hot tubs.
Okay, and what we can do is we'll put that answer in the comments down below once LaDonna gets back to me with it. And if you have questions, sure, by the way, and you're watching this, put the questions in the comments section, because what I'll do is I will find the answers, or I'll reach out to LaDonna and we'll find the answers for you, because we want to get everybody's questions about this answered. It's so important.
It is.
Okay, so now let's say that I'm arrive at the terminal. I'm getting ready to check in. So what assistance is available for individuals that may have a variety of challenges?
Well, we do, if you require a mobility device, that's one that you need to get on your own. You can pre-reserve a wheelchair and other medical equipment to be delivered to the ship by Special Needs at Sea. I'm sure you're familiar with them. Also with Scoot Around as well. So if you bring your own wheelchair, now we have wheelchairs that are available in the port facilities to get you on and off the ship, but we don't have wheelchairs that are available on board. You would need to order that in advance. Okay. And we do recommend that if you are bringing your own wheelchair, that we recommend that you bring collapsible wheelchairs, depending on the class of ship that you're in, because the width of the stateroom door does vary on some of those. And so we want to make sure that the passenger has the most accessibility. Okay.
And that would be in particular if you didn't have an accessible cabin, I'm sure, because if you got a wheelchair and don't have any, because you could have a suite that's not accessible, but plenty of space in the suite, and you just got to get the wheelchair through the door to get it in. Yeah. Okay. Very good. And then what about in the check-in process for somebody that has a sensory disorder? Because again, the crowds are a challenge. So is there now I'm assuming too that you guys, if I understand the Medallion program correctly, they'll get the medallions before they leave for the ship, right?
Correct. If they're in the US, they will get it before. It does have to be ordered at least 12 days in advance of the start of the journey. And I say that specifically because it would have to be, say you're doing a cruise tour to Alaska and you're doing land first, it would need to be at least 12 days before you start the land portion, even before you get to the ship. And so you want to order that in advance, get that to you. What that allows you to do, it allows you to get ocean ready. And with that, it is expedited embarkation. So this allows for a couple of different things. One, it's going to allow us to be able to spread people out more. Already does allow us to do that so that we don't have everybody, arriving at one time and sitting in big groups. So we actually had already eliminated a lot of that in terms of being in the large groups before COVID started. And so now it'll be even more of a cadence so that there just won't be the big crowds and hopefully not the sensory overload. But they will be able to do that online check-in in advance so that the embarkation process is really fast. it's not, and that's long since been one of the pain points of cruising. People don't like the check-in process, and it's regardless of whether or not you have a sensory sensitivity, right? It's something that people just don't like. And so that was a pain point we were already in the process of trying to eliminate. And Medallion does allow us to do that because you've already uploaded your passport, you've already done your credit card, everything is already done. It's basically going through a verification process when you get to the pier, as opposed to doing the old school, you know, you've got to stand in these really long lines and then finally get checked in.
Okay. All right. So that's going to make things better for everybody, not just those that have challenges.
Correct.
Yeah. And I'm not a huge fan of waiting in line. I tend to be, and usually the cruise line I've cruised most on is really good about they load passengers that have challenges, mobility issues, get early boarding usually. So I tend to get there early and get through early when there's not a lot of people, because I'm not a huge fan of crowds either. So
right.
But I'm looking forward to testing out the Medallion process. I think that there's a lot of things very cool about that. Okay, so you mentioned that when they get on board that they should check in with guest services just to make sure that everybody's aware of what they might need. Oh, and I got to ask this question too, and I forgot on one of the interviews I did. What about food allergies?
Those actually, we had a pretty good system in place for that. We've been doing that for many, many, many years. And I had a group that was traveling that had gluten sensitivity, and they, were varying different degrees of it. And I wanted to make sure that this was absolutely done perfectly. And I was going to be on the ship about a month before that. So I went in and talked to the executive chef, and he thought it was funny that, people are asking about this now because it's something that we've always done to prepare kosher food. So those different locations to prepare food were already in place, and some of them have been kind of repurposed so that we can handle the allergies. But it is something that you would want to let your travel advisor know in advance so that that can be on your reservation. And then it is communicated to the maitre d', it's communicated to your steward. And again, we already had the actual physical spaces in place in the kitchen to handle different allergies and sensitivities. But again, with Medallion, we do have the ability for people to be much more specific in terms of communicating with the staff members on board the ship and making sure that they are getting exactly what they want and in the cadence that they want it when they want it.
Okay. And so let me ask about specialty restaurants. And I'm assuming that the same thing exists for the specialty restaurants, that they have ways to cope with and manage people that might have food allergies. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
It just, again, one of the things I had forgotten to ask in other cases, and I'm getting educated as I go through this process as well. I appreciate your help. Okay, so,
and I believe that this is important for all of us to stay educated on, not just people who might have mobility, might have some mobility challenges or sensory sensitivities, but I believe that it's important for all of us as a community to know and understand that there are going to be other people within our community that are welcomed in, and that we want to provide a safe, comfortable place to everyone, regardless of what their challenges might be.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I do have a suggestion, a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But could we get armed guards at the elevators so that the people with wheelchairs can actually get on the elevator?
Oh my, I know.
Like I said, a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's amazing having to deal with it. Sometimes you wonder. Okay, so let's go to itineraries. We talked about the Baltic capitals not being a particularly friendly place. Are there other places you go that are not particularly friendly to, or where the, let me ask the question a little differently. Are there itineraries that are better than others for people that are traveling with mobility challenges?
I think it's something to know in terms of the destination. And how prevalent any kind of accessibility is in the overall destination. You know, is it something that is required for local transportation and things like that? Those are ways that you could go in and kind of at a glance see exactly how accessible things are going to be. So I would recommend, again, working with your travel advisor and doing some serious research. There really aren't very many destinations in the world that are not accessible, but there are some that are going to be more accessible than others. And, you know, we just want to make sure that when someone is coming on board, that they have the best time that is available to them. So we want to make sure that people are well educated. And that's one of the reasons that we make sure that everything from the accessibility information on our website to what's available behind the scenes to the travel advisors, to even marking it on the shore excursions, to seeing exactly what the accessibility is in each and every one of the ports. But I would say overall, that's probably, you know, that where the Baltic is probably the least accessible of all of the destinations. You're going to find that even in South America, you've got more accessibility options than you do in some of those Baltic areas.
Okay, yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I had a young lady on the recently, and she was talking about it, and I made a comment about the U.S. being, you know, it's pretty much the default that it's accessible, and she just laughed at me. And then as we were talking, I started thinking about some things, because anybody that's been in a wheelchair down near the French Quarter in New Orleans, where the sidewalks slope at about a 45-degree angle and our cobblestone, yeah, that's not so great for accessibility. And then our last cruise, we were out of Miami. We tried to get an accessible taxi, you know, just something that would have room to put the fold-up wheelchair in it.
Right.
And they sent us a sedan, you know, and the guy put it in the trunk and hope that nothing fell off as we went down the road. And I'm like, okay.
Oh my word.
Yeah. So everything is going to be relative, and you're going to have to do your research, you know, and work things out ahead of time. And again, that's what your travel agent is for. Listen, LaDonna, I really appreciate your time and Princess making you available. Like I look forward to being able to get on board and to do some travel with you guys, hopefully this year. I was planning to go last year, and I didn't have it booked, but I had one lined up and thinking about it, and then all of a sudden everything went to pieces. You know, so
yeah,
I am hoping
it's been a very challenging year.
Yes, and I feel sorry for everybody that was involved, because you know, passengers got messed up, you know, hard on the crews, hard on the staff, everybody. It was just a bad year. Anyway, thank you very much. Again, for those of you that are listening, if you have questions, put them in the comments. And if you haven't already done so, please hit like, subscribe, and hit the notify button. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for having me.